This is George Kriza and Per Sjofors. We're very happy to welcome you to our podcast today. We got an exciting discussion on a topic that's relevant to almost everyone, which is how to price effectively for the highest profit and for the highest volume. Per is known as the price whisperer. So we'll be very interested to get his views and thoughts on that. And Per, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit and give our audience a background?
Yeah, thank you very much, George, for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to this, and I hope I can provide the audience with some nuggets of practical advice, say, right? As the audience could hear from my name, I'm a bloody foreigner. So, but I lived here in Los Angeles now for actually 30 years. So it adds up. On the way, I tried to a few other countries and so forth. So I got quite a lot of international business experience.
You're Scandinavian?
I'm Swedish, yes, yeah.
There you go.
So I now have dual passports. So
Very good. So as I said in our introduction, pricing is always an issue. We've got lots of different viewpoints and thoughts on pricing. What got you into the world of pricing? How did you become a price expert?
well, this is what happened. I I ran a couple of companies in Europe before I moved here then 30 years ago, and I came here to establish and run a division for what I thought was a fairly substantial public company, and and then I have had another few CEO jobs, and in all these instances we did experiments with pricing. And some of those experiments were very successful, meaning that next quarter revenues are up 25% or so. Others were complete duds. And what I had learned in business school about pricing was so theoretical and so academic that it didn't help us to understand why some of those experiments worked and others didn't. So when it was time for me to set out on my own, I thought to myself, what kind of process would I have needed as the CEO of a company to make sure that my pricing is right, that every pricing experiment is a success? And then I developed that process. And the process is as follows. It's based on something called pricing research. And pricing research is a subcategory of market research where you go out to a marketplace. Well, this is very important to realize that it's a marketplace. It is not customers, right? And and from that, it is possible with the proprietary method that we've developed and the AI software that we also develop to accurately predict sales volume and revenue at precise price points. And then you know how to price when you do a pricing experiment for success.
Yeah, I've always felt that running market experiments, part of my background is sales incentives, and people would always ask me, well, what's the best thing to do? And I would say, well, I can give you my recommendations on structure and approach, but the bottom line is until you run market experiments, you're not going to know for sure which is the most applicable in your case. But I
Mhm.
would encourage you to run market experiments. And what I found is that very few people are actually willing to run market experiments because I think it might also apply with pricing just equally, if not more so. It's a high risk set of experiments because you're always wondering how much am I going to, if I do it wrong, how
Yeah.
much am I going to cost myself in the current quarter?
Yeah, that's very, very true. And the unbeknownst to many companies is that everything you do in a company affects how you can set prices. And what I'm saying with that is that um, and this is the process that we developed. If a company doesn't focus on the most desirable customer category, or sometimes people call them avatars or personas, if you don't focus your company on those that are most desirable, you can't do the best pricing. If your product to market fit isn't optimal, you're not getting pricing power, right? But you have to sell it to low prices. If your marketing is not effective, if you're using the wrong channels and the wrong message and the wrong um, positioning statements and so forth, you're not going to be able to charge the prices that you want. And the same with sales. If you if you're not using the optimum sales channel and optimum sales methodologies, prices ends up having to be low, right? And then you may end up with a pricing strategy and structure that is also not optimal, right? Um, and and um, and so all of these affects how you can set prices. And the problem with experimenting, you should always experiment, but the problem with experimenting is, let's say you want to try six different um, six different price points, right? Then you may want to target that to six different customer targets. Then you need to try that with, say, six different marketing messages in three different marketing channels. You want to try that with three different sales channels and maybe three different sales methodologies. And then you want to structure your pricing stratified in some way in six different ways, right? And you end up with 36,000 combinations, right? And um, some of them will make a huge difference, right? But the problem is that if you start with all of this, by the time you're done, um, you know, everything moved on, and I mean, you can't just do that many experiments.
Yeah, so you'd have to be selective. You'd have to do some pre-filtering, right? You more or less, as a set of management decisions, you have to ideally identify the optimal customer first, or market profile first, avatar, whatever word you like to use. And then in doing so, you're going to hopefully reduce the complexity of the experimentation. But, I guess depending on your product, whether it's a software product or a hardware product, whether it's an automobile or a box of Kleenex, or again, a piece of, let's say, Microsoft Excel for the sake of argument. And by the way, of all the people that make so much money selling software, my hat is off to Microsoft. they continue to they continue to maximize their revenue, and I guess they have now surpassed Apple for the moment as
Mhm.
the largest market cap in the world.
Hmm.
But yeah, so each of these equations is somewhat different, right? And the cost structures are different. But one of the things I'm getting from what you're telling me is that your cost shouldn't be your primary driver in terms of this determining the market price.
N-
Because would you say that the cost is really irrelevant to the consumer at some level, to the corporate buyer, whoever it is, the cost is kind of irrelevant. They will pay what they want to pay for your value proposition. Is that
Yeah,
true?
absolutely. And let me give you an example, right? Where and it's going to be an example on how marketing makes a difference, right? And this is a company that came to us a couple of years ago, and they said, we tried to increase prices 7 years ago, and it backfired badly, right? Um, now we need to increase prices, and uh, we want to make sure we do it right this time, right? Um, so the study proved that the company was not using an optimal marketing message, right, or positioning statement rather. So once that was corrected, right, this company could increase prices, and they went from a $200 million company to $240 million company in 1 week, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Um, and and um, and that's a sort of pretty typical results when you have all this data related to pricing, right? Let me give you another example. A company that sells a service to other businesses, and um, they um, they sell these services on a onesie twosie. You know, the companies, their client says, "Now I need this service, and I'm going to use it for a particular person in the company, and I'm going to buy it, and it's going to cost me whatever, $150 or thereabouts." Um, what we found was that 80% of the market want to buy an annual subscription with all you can eat access to these to this particular service, right? And it's a piece of software. There's no added cost for selling one more of these services. Um, so the company, successful as it were, served 20% of the addressable market, right? They are now obviously in the process of adding a subscription option to their services, so they can access the entire market, right?
And this is a software company you're talking about.
Yes, it's a software, yeah, a SaaS company.
So I wanted to segue into discussing subscriptions in general,
Mhm.
but maybe before, let's just park that for just 1 minute, because I know for our audience's benefit, the Paris organization assisted our company some years ago, my prior company, in thinking about pricing. And one of our problems that we created ourselves when we wrote our contracts way back when, 25 years ago, we wrote our contracts with our clients in such a way that the price was static. We
Mm.
were a value provider in the first place. We gave, for example, I think in the beginning we were charging $40 an hour for customer service work, and we know that some of our competitors, the multi-billion-dollar competitors, were charging well over $100, some as much as $150 an hour for exactly the same thing. So that's, I suppose, shooting yourself in the foot right out of the gate. But on top of which, we had no mechanism in the agreement, nor no thought process to account for escalators in pricing. So what's your view on escalators? I'd like to further qualify this, because as much as we recognize in many cases every year costs go up, and when we look at the last 2, 3 years, but after COVID, inflation has really gotten much worse than ever before.
Mhm.
And we see it when we go to the restaurant, we see it when we go to the grocery store. The cost increases have been pushed at the market in general. So, and yet, I would think that if I'm the buyer, I'm thinking that it's the provider's responsibility to push costs down every year, whether by outsourcing or whether by offshoring or whatever the case may be. So, how do you handle, before we get to subscriptions, how do we handle escalators in an agreement?
Well, first of all, you you make sure that you have escalators, that you have clauses in the agreement that allow you to increase prices, right? And um, and as a general rule, you should increase prices by 3-4% every year. And I'm saying that because it's going to be small changes, right? And it's going to be, they're so small that the customer typically don't really notice, or if they do notice, they don't care, right? But for you as the seller, these small changes compound. So after a few years, it really makes a difference, right? The other way of doing this, and I've written a guide actually on how you increase prices. That I call it 7 easy steps to increase prices and keep your customers happy. Um, it's um, it's on the website. It's for free, or you can go and buy it for Amazon for $2.99 if you want. Um, so there's a process, and the process to increase prices is all based on the right messaging to the customers, right? And let me give you another example here. Another SaaS company, um, they were so underpriced, very similar to what you mentioned, George. They were so underpriced that in the study we did, we found that they could, in the first year, increase prices with 41% on the average, right? And what we did, we expected that this would have a significant pushback. So we helped this company to develop information material on why they needed to increase prices and what additional benefits the customers would get from the increase in price, right? Meaning essentially more resource to develop these products further, right? We also, in anticipation of a negative feedback, we trained their customer-facing people on how to defend that price increase, right? Customer-facing people here being salespeople and customer support people mostly. And then we helped them with the whole process of messaging. And lo and behold, once they increased prices by 41%, the CEO got 2 angry emails and 1 angry phone call, right? And they had 17,000 customers at the time on annual subscription, and they didn't lose a single one, right?
Yeah.
The following year, we helped them to double prices, right? At that point, they lost maybe a dozen or so customers. But the company at the time when we first engaged with them were about 12 million. They are now 180, right? And that is because they got simply more resource to put into market development, right? And product development. Actually, also they got more resource, so they bought one of their competitors. So
Well, that sounds like a terrific approach because the alternative is to raise more capital and to increase your burn rate, right? In order to
yeah,
do the same thing, which a lot of people actually do, but perhaps it's not always necessary.
that's right.
Interesting. Once again, talking through this, another situation I think that dovetails into what we're talking about is of escalators is how to deal with RFPs. If you're living in a B2B world, RFPs are a fact of life. They show up on your doorstep almost every week, if not every day. Someone's looking for your product or service, and I've seen so many different approaches to RFPs from the customer, the way they're approaching it. Some RFPs are finite. We actually had, and by the way, I'm sure you're well aware, an RFP is a huge project to undertake because almost always there's 15, 20, 25 pages worth of questions and commitments and service level agreements and so on and so forth. And we actually had one situation with a major provider that put us into a reverse auction,
Mhm.
which was the most painful experience I think I ever remember. Everyone had everyone had a opportunity to bid, and whenever someone dropped their price, this was done in real time at the final moment. And you were sitting there until 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, because the time lags were allowed in order to respond, and people kept responding, and then your price just kept diving. So, do you have any thoughts on dealing with RFPs in general? I guess some people feel like RFPs, the minute you get an RFP, you're in trouble already because you're not the preferred provider.
That's exactly right. I've stopped responding to RFPs, and I with the one very unusual example when you're very close to your customer and so you are the preferred provider. You know that the RFP is written to fit your company, right? And otherwise, I mean, I don't think I've been around the block for a little while, and I've in all the various companies, I don't know how many RFPs we eventually um, responded to, but I don't think I won a single one unless we were the preferred provider, right? And sometimes what happened on the buyer side is that um, somebody says that, okay, we are going to buy this product or service from our preferred provider, but our policy says that we have three different proposals to choose from, right? So therefore, let's find some competitors to that preferred provider and let them do an RFP, right? So so I think it's a huge waste of time. Huge waste of time. Having said that, there are certain companies, especially those that sell to local or state or national governments, that live by RFPs, right? And and these RFPs are being published, in the public, so to speak, and anybody can respond to them. Um, and some companies are doing that correctly, and they do win business.
I was in one situation I'll share with you. I don't believe I've told you this in the past, but I'm not going to use the company's name, but this was a very large multi-billion-dollar distributor in the technology area.
Hmm.
And we were already the provider for them. And their policy was that every, whatever, 5 years, 7 years, they want to see what's out in the market and how the competitive landscape lays out. And we went through all of that. We filled it all out, and we were invited in for the presentation. And it occurred to me that rather than jump directly into price, and I think this will agree with what you said at the beginning of our discussion, I gave a lot of thought to why we were their existing provider and
Hmm.
what it was that made us the preferred provider. And I came up with what I don't remember exactly, 5, 6, or 7 points
Hmm.
of why our value proposition and our delivery and our fundamental software platform was orders of magnitude better than anything in the market. So before we got into any line item on their RFP or in that final hour and a half of negotiation, I said, before we begin, I want to throw these benefit statements up on the screen. and I want you to tell me whether you agree or disagree with every one of these benefit statements.
Mhm.
Do you agree that we're this? Do you agree that we're that? Do you agree that our product is better than anyone else on the market? And they said yes to every one of them. They said, George, there is no question that both your company, your service level, and your software product are the best in the market. I go, I'm glad we got that out of the way.
I think that's actually a very good way of doing it. And that goes back to the importance of we talked about how you do price increases, right? And that the one thing that the companies almost always forget is to remind the customer of the benefit they deliver, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen that so many times. I mean, we all use various software platforms, either personally or in our businesses, and and some of them the only way they increase prices is when you look at your credit card statement, right? Netflix, for example, right? Um, and and that's not the way to do it, right? Um, Others send you an email saying that we are going to increase prices, period, right? And they don't take that opportunity to say we are increasing prices because we are going to give you even more value, right? You already have value because you are a subscriber, but we are increasing prices so you can get even more value, right?
Yeah, using that example, again, now is a good time to segue into subscriptions, but using that example in particular, in the direction you're taking it, uh, they do the exact opposite of that. Not only do they disclose you get a new agreement, and you either click on it or it goes away, right?
Mhm.
But secondly, what's happening is, at least in the television subscription market, uh, they're they're adding commercials into the programming where you never had commercials before. And
Mhm.
if you want to go back commercial free, uh, then you have to go from whatever, $12 a month to $15 a month. And
Mhm.
so they're inflicting pain on you as a way as a way of getting you to pay more money, which I'm not sure that's the smartest approach. But let's back up for a second. And uh, subscriptions, I think, I'm not sure where they originated, but uh, some years ago, I'm not sure how many years ago, but you might know the answer. Some years ago, the big software providers transitioned from a finite price, one-time price, and then later you'd have an upgrade whenever the upgrade came every 3-4 years, and you had to pay. Maybe you bought a piece of software for $300 or $150, and then when it was time to upgrade, they sold you the next version for $50. Some number that was a fractional component. And then and I keep thinking of Microsoft, because Microsoft, whatever Microsoft Office cost, Microsoft Office was, I don't have these numbers in my head, but maybe Microsoft Office was $249. I'm gonna just pick that number at random,
Sure.
and you'd pay that number one time, and then, and I know it's not that big a number anymore, but they decided to go subscription, and so the revenue stream, instead of 249, became 149 annually,
Mhm.
forever.
Mhm.
And so that would increase your revenue so dramatically and drastically. And at one level, the value proposition is, well, we're continuously improving the software, and we're putting more power in it, more features, less bugs, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, it's worth it. And this is the only way we can do it. But as the consumer, I say to myself, well, that's a gold mine for you, Microsoft, and it's way out of line. So there's some balance at some point that the market's going to drive to, and people that are powerhouses like Microsoft are probably able to hold price at that bigger number, whatever that bigger number is, $150 annually for a long, long time. Uh, so that's one situation. And then the other situation is, as we described, someone like Netflix. And then you
Mhm.
have a proliferation of Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and on and on and on and on. And so if you're ending up paying $12 a month for every one of these subscriptions, uh, isn't there going to be a pain point in either category, TV or business software? Isn't there a pain point where you're saying to yourself, suddenly my subscription bill is so enormous every month, as opposed to one cost, now I'm paying, let's get absurd for a minute, I'm paying $2,000 a month for umpteen different subscriptions, and won't there be a compression at some point where people will just weed it all out and pick a couple that they like? So I know I just threw about 20 topics out there at you, but what's your thinking on that playing field of subscriptions?
Well, that's first of all, let me tell you this. I'm an Apple guy, and I do not use Microsoft products. One reason is first of all, they're crappy products compared to what comes with your Mac, right? But Microsoft has a monopoly. They can do whatever they want, right? And yes, of course, there is eventually going to be a pain point where people stop buying it, right? And I'm surprised, to be honest, that because there are alternatives, even if you have a PC that is again, and I think the the biggest competitor to Microsoft is Google, right?
Yeah, I
Which
think
is
everybody thought it might become open office, but Google's killing them at the moment.
yeah, correct, and that's an even crappier product, right? But it's kind of free, so you get what you pay for. Um,
Right.
so um, so but again, Microsoft has a monopoly, so they can price which way they want. But it also used to be so. If you look at business to business software, it used to be that you bought a license for whatever number for whatever cost that license was, and then um, you bought a maintenance contract that was typically 18 to 20% of the original cost of the software, and for that you got upgrades and you got bug fixes and so forth until the until the company came out with a dramatically different product, right? And then you had to buy it again at some point.
Right.
So
And that was mainly enterprise class products that had
yes,
kind of support structure.
but it means that the idea of reoccurring revenue is not that new, right? And and the whole idea behind many of these SaaS platforms, and SaaS, of course, is not new at all. It used to be called timeshare, right? And was invented in the 1950s somewhere, right? So it's not new, but it investors and companies, both on the buying and the selling side, love the idea with reoccurring revenue, because it makes the business more predictable, right? And from the buyer's point of view, the entry point is lower, so that's a good thing. And you can put whatever the cost is in the budget, and you know it's not going to change, right? And the same for the seller. Um, they know they can with accuracy predict the the revenues they're going to have for a long time in the future, which is why both companies that sells on a subscription and their investors love that model, right?
And I guess it could be argued that it improves stickiness.
Yes. Now, when it comes to the Netflix issue, if I remember reading about this, that, and I think I was part of it as well, that before we started to stream our video content, our TV, the average household paid roughly $100 in access to bundles of 250 channels on the cable, right? Of which they watched an average 7 channels, right? And and that was one of the beautiful things when streaming came, because you you didn't have to spend all that money, and you still have access to content. And then of course there were more and more streaming providers, and now we're back into the same mess. If there is a particular show you want to watch, you have to subscribe to that particular provider, and then you may watch the show and you forget that you have a subscription, and you never open that provider's
But at the same
service
time,
again.
excuse me, at the same time, what's happening, I think this is very current, if I read the news correctly, you have power players like Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or Paramount as subscription offers, and they're, as we talked about earlier, they're all trying to raise their price point, and people like Disney in particular see themselves as a super premium provider. But in fact, what seems to be happening is the market is ebbing and flowing against, or arguing against, that value proposition, and I think that's what's happening. And so as big and powerful as Disney is, there is some sort of retrenchment going on. I know I canceled it, and Paramount I'm not going to cancel, but Disney, I don't need Disney, no matter how great they think they are. I'm not going to pay what they think they're worth, and so on. And so, but what's happening in my head is happening in the head of oceans of people
Yes.
they're arbitrating. Well, I got, again, 10, 15 different choices, and I'm not going to just automatically bow down to the most expensive one.
Well, as far as I don't follow the streaming market very much anymore, but as far as I think that Disney Plus is actually failing, and so is Paramount, right? Um, and for the reasons you just mentioned. I mean, people they have too many choices already, right? And they paying too much money already, and you have um, one of these entrances in the market, and it's just too much, right? I mean, there's only so many hours you can watch TV. So, I think that at some point in the future, and that may be a couple of years away, there's going to be a massive implosion not in the number of subscribers, but in the number of service providers providing this, because I think um, more and more people will eventually just say that this is enough, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you compare that with the music streaming industry, which is very interesting, um, where you really, I mean, you have only a handful of providers. You have Spotify and you have Apple Music, and yes, there are music on YouTube, and yes, there are music on Amazon, but they're really secondary players. Um, and um, and then there's a couple of um, streaming platform more specifically to audiophiles like Tidal and Kubus, that has very few subscribers in the whole.
And they're
But
charging 17 a month or whatever for 192 kbit mbit.
no. The I'm actually a Tidal subscriber, and I get many of the contents are studio quality, so 192 megabit, or 24 bit 192 kilohertz.
Right.
So um, but um, but the big difference is that in the music industry, the streaming platform doesn't own the content. Whereas in the video streaming, the streaming platform owns the content, right? And that makes the competition becomes completely different, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because I think over the last 10 years, they have morphed from just content providers to content producers. So they've become, Netflix has become a production company, a studio company, just like 20th Century Fox or whoever historically, MGM.
Yeah.
And so they're producing their own unique content, and that probably is their path to competitive survival.
Oh, it absolutely is. I don't think they have their own production facilities, but they outsource the production to thousands of production companies.
But
Um,
nonetheless, they're going to own that content
yes.
once it's produced for them,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they'll bankroll it as well. Anyway, so any other grand thought you have on subscriptions, or do you want to move into one other area yet?
Um, no, I think that any company, even if you sell hardware, you can sell a subscription if you tweak it correctly, right? If you sell something that is a consumable, it can always be a subscription, right? And and um and Amazon has really done a very good job in promoting that thought, because you go to Amazon, and a lot of the different things that you buy would buy in a grocery store, because they're consumables, are available on subscription. And
I was talking to my landscaper, believe it or not, the other day, who was complaining about his lack of profitability. And I said, you might think about going to an annual, or an annual rate to take care of everything ordinary, and, do a gold, silver, platinum kind of structure where you have additional inclusions and then guarantee yourself the profitability.
yeah,
And he said he tried it a few years ago. It didn't work. I said, well, you might want to try it again because people are getting more acclimated to that idea. And certainly you got to stay in business. You got to have enough people around to remove the snow and to cut the grass and to do the flowers and whatever else it is. So yeah, so anyway, there's just lots of application to much broader than just software or TV or audio, where uh, a subscription model or a continuously recurring revenue model, even if you don't call it a subscription, is better for everybody. And the key is to make sure that your clientele understands it's better for them too,
that's
not just
right.
you. It's better for everybody.
Hmm.
Then you simply have to arbitrate, well, what's the rational universe of what people can and will pay for the deliverable.
I think that it's for many companies, it's a mindset, and it's a very difficult mind. Let me again give you an example. Um, we um, we we worked with a kind of a friend of mine who ran a veterinary practice here in Los Angeles, and he had this plan to turn his vet practice into a concierge vet practice. So what's the difference? Well, in a concierge vet practice, you subscribe on the service, and it's a fixed price, and you pay it every month whether you use it or not, right? Now this guy was serving fairly affluent areas, right? And had a an affluent customer roster, if you like, a lot of celebrities and so forth. And people are willing to pay enormous amount of money to keep their cats and dogs happy, right? And alive. And so we found out the exact price that he should charge for this, but he could not get his mind around the fact that once you sell a concierge service, everything is included, right? And so he came to me and said, "Okay, I'm charging now these fees, whatever it was, I can't remember. And how much extra should I charge when I give the dog some shots?" Right? And I said, "You should not." But he couldn't get his head around that change in business model. For
Yeah.
him, it was all right. So this shot is a cost for me, and therefore I have to put it on to the client, even though the client already paying a subscription.
Yeah, so it's sort of a hybrid model. It's funny you bring up the veterinary medicine angle because I was out to dinner last week with a CEO group that I belong to, and out of the blue came up the idea that two of those CEOs had concierge doctors themselves, and I had
Yeah.
never even heard of it. And
Oh,
they said,
really?
"Yeah, I'm paying $3,000 a year, and now my doctor has limited his practice to 500 people only. Before that, he had 20,000 patients, and now he's going to have 500 patients. He spends all the time in the world with me. If he has something to talk about with me, he'll pick up the phone and call me, and it's just the best relationship ever, and it's well worth the $3,000. Obviously, you have to be able to afford the $3,000, but that sounds like a bargain based on today's way of practicing medicine.
Yeah, well, that makes healthcare and not sick care,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
paradise.
because
Right.
the concierge doctor is and we've done some work in that space too, is hell bent to keep you healthy, right? Because if you get sick, it's going to cost them a lot more money,
Interesting.
you know?
Well, it's a very beneficial a mental shift.
Yeah, very much.
Let me ask you this. As we've been talking here and we're getting close to wrapping up, uh, what would you like to tell our audience in terms of what type of companies you are interested in working with and typically work with? And uh, what is your approach? What's an engagement look like? What would you like to share with the audience about how you can help your
Well,
corporate clients?
yeah, first off, the best way of finding me and I have a book out that's called The Price Whisper, and the best way of finding me is to do a Google search for The Price Whisper. You'll get about 10 million hits, and it's mostly me, right? So that gives you links to websites and YouTube channels and so forth, and all these articles that I've written. Um, the an engagement, the kind of companies we work with are first of all, we always deal with the CEO, right? And we always deal with the CEO that because when we do one of these projects, it is so transformational for a company. And many of our clients double in size in a couple of years. And it has to be companies that are willing to change, right? If they're not willing to change, they're not the kind of customer we should work with, because we will point to, you know, like I said, maybe they have to focus on a different customer category. Maybe they have to change their marketing. Maybe they have to change how they sell. Maybe they have to change their product or service. Maybe they have to, and obviously they have to change their pricing strategy. So all of this means that the company needs to be prepared to change, right? And we work with mostly with the mid-market companies, and that's why the CEO is always the contact person, and it we do projects, we do market verification projects that are very, very quick, very small, very quick, and also very affordable. And we typically, for larger clients, we typically work with them on a yearly engagement. Part of it is to get our fees into a retainer, right? We talked about subscription, right? So the sales friction goes down, and it's affordable for the buyer in a different way. And we don't have any industry focus. We work with software, we work with hardware. I mean, we're currently working a project for a company who's selling these wooden stakes that surveyors are using, right? But we're also working with very advanced software that connects buyers and sellers of physical goods, right? So it's all over the place. The key is company wants to take themselves to the next level, and they realize that requires change.
And what we're doing here at Challenging Decisions is we are working with CEOs as well, but I would say, really in any area that's causing them tremendous pain. And it could be price, in which case we team up with Per and work with him, but it could be culture, it could be M&A, it could be leverage problems, it could be software development problems. We can project ourselves across a number of different disciplines. Anytime that a CEO feels like they need senior help, they need expertise that may not be in their wheelhouse, that's something that Challenging Decisions and George Kriza can be very effective. And we too are looking for a cost-effective way of delivering our service to you. So we'd welcome a conversation. I'm sure, as Per would, we'd welcome conversations to see whether there's an appropriate fit for our service and delivery. So given that, Per, thank you so much for spending the time with us and our audience today. And we are hopeful that there's some value out there in this conversation. And we look forward to engaging in any commentary or conversation that you have. This will be posted on YouTube and other media like LinkedIn. And so we'd welcome to interact with you with this topic of the price whisperer. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, George. And it was a very pleasant conversation, and I hope the audience will find it valuable.
Thank you, Per.